Good afternoon. I'd like to talk today about the Longleaf Pine Initiative. Longleaf pine ecosystems once covered more than 90 million acres across the Southeast, stretching from Virginia to Texas. These forests dominated nearly two-thirds of the region and supported some of the most biologically diverse temperate ecosystems in North America. However, due to logging, land conversion, and decades of fire suppression, longleaf pine declined to roughly 3 million acres by the early 2000s, less than 5% of its historic range. What was once the defining forest of the Southeast became one of its most endangered ecosystems. In response to this dramatic loss, the Longleaf Pine Initiative emerged as a coordinated multi-state effort to restore longleaf ecosystems across their historic range. Rather than operating as a regulatory agency, the initiative functions as a collaborative partnership. Its goals include increasing longleaf acreage, restoring frequent fire regimes, improving wildlife habitat, and strengthening overall ecosystem function. The initiative brings together state and forest agencies, federal partners such as the Natural Resources Conservation Service and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, nonprofit conservation organizations, prescribed fire practitioners, and private landowners. Federal and state agencies provide funding and technical support. NGOs contribute research, outreach, and coordination. Prescribed fire practitioners implement burns on the ground, and private landowners manage much of the landscape where restoration occurs. This partnership model allows restoration to occur at a regional scale. The ecological value of the longleaf forest makes this work especially important. These systems are biodiversity hotspots, capable of supporting hundreds of plant species per acre, along with rare and endangered species, such as the red cockaded woodpecker and gopher tortoises. Longleaf ecosystems also improve water infiltration, recharge aquifers, and increase landscape resilience. Prescribed fire is central to the initiative's strategy. Historically, these forests burned every 1 to 3 years. Frequent fires keep the understory open, limit hardwood encroachment, and maintain the grassy structure that supports high biodiversity.
All right, to start, I would like to thank Jason Ayers for taking his time to become our expert interview for this project. Jason, why don't you talk about your professional background and your experiences with the longleaf restoration projects?
Sure. Thank you, Dean. For 25 years, I worked as a wildlife biologist for the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. During that time, I was both the state and national lead for many species, threatened, endangered, and at risk that are associated with the longleaf pine ecosystem. From there, I also worked in the Partners for Fish and Wildlife program and the Coastal program, through which we provided technical and financial assistance for the restoration and management of longleaf pine on both private, state, and federal properties. I retired from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and as of this June, work for Folkland Management, a private wildlife consulting company, where many of our clients are doing active longleaf pine restoration.
So, Jason, you've worked with different restoration projects, and I'm sure they all have their differences. What would you say are the biggest differences between some of them? And which ones have you worked with the most?
That's a hard question to answer in terms of the most, but they all have different purposes and objectives. I dealt with longleaf restoration on private lands, which has a very different purpose than longleaf pine restoration on a federal military installation or on a national forest. Some of them are being restored and managed for endangered species. Some of them are being managed for quail. Some of them are old growth longleaf pine that just need to be restored due to lack of fire and maintenance. Others are brand new longleaf plantings trying to get a longleaf pine stand established.
Nice. So there in the South, there's a rather large push for longleaf ecosystems. Why do you think that there is such a push, and what are some of the benefits to a longleaf pine ecosystem?
Well, certainly it was our dominant ecosystem historically. Millions and millions and millions of acres across the Southeast in open, fire maintained longleaf pine forest. And we've lost almost all of that. It got really low when I first started with the Fish and Wildlife Service back in 1999. And since then, we have planted millions of acres. So we're making some headway. But that ecosystem is what supports our native species. And without it, we lose those species or they become, as I mentioned earlier, threatened, endangered, or at risk.
What happened with the longleaf ecosystem? You said that that was the native. What happened in the past that caused it to dwindle down?
Habitat conversion to agricultural fields, conversion for shopping malls, or conversion to loblolly pine plantations in lieu of longleaf.
Gotcha. Okay, so switching it up to the management side of things. Through our research, we have read that prescribed fire is one of the most useful tools in longleaf management. In your opinion, what are the most critical stages to burn, and how do the seasons play a role in this?
I think it's critical during all stages. I think if you're not going to use prescribed fire, don't even bother with longleaf pine. Longleaf pine needs to be burned the year after it's planted. While they're still in that grass stage, start burning them. If not, the competition just takes over and you will not have a longleaf pine stand. You will have kind of a junky mess, to be honest with you. But from there, as a stand matures, you have to use prescribed fire to keep out the loblollies, to keep out the hardwoods, the sweet gums, and the competition that occurs. Longleaf pine is only one part of the ecosystem. The other big part of it is the native ground cover. That is maintained through prescribed fire. Without it, you lose that. And then you had a second part to that question. What was the second part?
In your opinion, or how do the seasons play a role come burning?
Um, Certainly traditionally it's been winter or dormant season burning.
Right.
And that's okay. That removes the competition. That allows longleaf pine seedlings to start growing strong in the next spring, next growing season. It will maintain open habitat, but it doesn't do a whole lot for hardwood control. That's where we get into growing season burns. Repeated growing season burns can really do a lot in terms of controlling the sweet gums. If you burn sweet gum in the winter, in the dormant season, you top kill it and it resprouts. So instead of having one stem, now you have several stems. You burn it again, now you have even more stems originating from the same root system. And it never goes away. With growing season burning, we can eliminate both the top portion as well as the root system. And if not, it becomes, really becomes more of a hardwood understory, midstory. You eliminate that, then you really restore that grassy understory that's meant to be part of the longleaf pine ecosystem.
So about how late in the season would you do a growing season burn? Because there's certain stages or certain times of the year where it could get a little dangerous for longleaf. How late would you be burning until it gets to a critical area?
Well, it's only dangerous to a longleaf when they're younger. And when they're younger, say grass stage on up till maybe 15 feet or so, you really got to worry about that terminal bud when it starts elongating. In the wintertime, the terminal bud is not doing anything, it's dormant, and it's covered by very long needles. Well, it depends. It varies every year with weather, how cold of a winter we've had, and several other factors. But in the growing season, that terminal bud starts elongating, and when it does, it's bare. There are no needles to protect it. During that period, that's when you can harm or kill longleaf with fire. So you either have to hit them before they start growing in the dormant season, or in the growing season after they have grown and elongated, but they've also grown needles to protect those buds.
What about intensity of fires? So, I mean, for example, we've had a couple that, the wind might switch up and it might roll through a stand of longleaf. Do you still think that during a dormant season, would they still survive?
Yes, dormant and growing season. If the wind switches, intensity is a little more than you want, yes, you will lose some, but I'd much rather see us lose some than not burn at all. It's
Right.
so hard to find enough days to burn in a given year that I would hate to limit ourselves even more on the possibility of losing a few trees here and there. Ideally, we're talking about ecological management and restoration, at which point you should try to get to an uneven age stand anyway. Younger trees mixed in with older trees, and certainly losing a few here and there due to fire will help get to that point.
Okay. And then also just to kind of go back to what you were saying before in terms of frequency of burning, most blocks on a management plan are set, 2 to 3 years for fire. Would you still stick to a 2 to 3 year rotation, or would you maybe bring it down to like a 1 or 2?
You cannot categorically say stick to a 2 or 3 year rotation. Every site is different. If you're in the sand hills, those deep sandy soils do not have near the competition that a heavy soil does in the low country. So in the sand hills, you might get away with, say, a 5 year rotation. In the low country, in some spots, you almost need annual prescribed fire. It's all, and you got to look at what you're managing for. Maybe there's species that you need to maintain ground cover for, where you're not going to burn it a certain year. I would hate to try to stick to a certain 2 to 3 year window, because it changes every year and site conditions vary throughout the state in terms of when you should burn, how often you should burn.
So it would just mostly be completely site dependent on where you are.
Yes, absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I think that is all that I have for you. I just want to say thank you again for being our interviewee and giving us a lot to think about.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Where longleaf has been lost, restoration involves planting longleaf seedlings, removing competing vegetation, and reintroducing fire. Financial cost share programs make these practices feasible for private landowners. Monitoring and adaptive management ensure that restoration efforts are meeting ecological targets such as increased acreage and improved habitat quality. The Longleaf Pine Initiative demonstrates that large-scale ecosystem restoration requires coordinated partnerships, science-based management, and long-term commitment. Its growth from roughly 3 million acres to over 5 million acres today shows measurable progress.